Okay, guys, I'm going to have to re-record this. I got a corrupted file, tried to fix it, and I've been getting an error turning my computer off, so I don't know what's going on. So I'm going to try and re-record it. The dinner match. Having agreed to the dinner match, we headed to the Dunkelfelder dormitory. There were training grounds there, apparently, so that the duchy students could play whenever they wanted. Just how obsessed were they? It really boggled the mind. Under normal circumstances, students were only able to enter their own dormitory, but we had Dunkelfelder with us today. We were given face stones containing his mana, which authorized us to go inside with the others. Upon reaching the training grounds, we divided ourselves into our teams and moved to opposite ends of the field to discuss our game plans. I could see Dunkelfelder's knights form a circle around Hyacinth and Handlor as they started arguing about the best strategies for their representatives to use. I also noticed that Handlor was clad in face stone armor, which she had evidently put on at some point. Wish they would shut up, please. I'm trying to get this done. Only guard knights wore armor in the Royal Academy, so I never carried my armor face stone around with me as I did my High Beast one. She looks so calm and peaceful, but I guess she isn't a Dunkelfelder Archduke candidate after all. Eep. I was dragged from my thoughts by a flick to the forehead. Your eyes were glazed over, fool. Pay attention, Ferdinand scolded me. As a treasure in this game, you must not leave this circle. Simply make a shield of wind and wait inside your High Beast. You are forbidden from doing anything unnecessary. Ferdinand was wearing his armor atop his clothes. He removed 2 of the protective charm bracelets from my arms and put them on his wrists. Then he took off his completely unembroidered Ehrenfest cape and replaced it with his usual blue one, which was covered with protective magic circles. Justice was helping him with that while I gazed in the direction of the night building and thought back to the Interduchy tournament. Is it wise to abandon the Interduchy tournament to play dinner like this, Ferdinand? I asked, thinking that Sylvester and the others would have a hard time dealing with all the visitors without us. Ferdinand grimaced. Had we postponed this to a later date, we would have attracted the attention of an unwanted crowd and even the king himself. We had no choice but to do this now while everyone is distracted with the Interduchy tournament. We have no right to complain, as I was quite clear about not wanting to participate before my hand was forced. Indeed, it seemed that I was the thoughtless one here. My apologies, I said. Still, what exactly is your plan here? Did you really need to wrap Lady Handler and me into this? You are more than capable of defending yourself, no? This will allow me to preserve mana without needing to devote unnecessary attention to the treasure, he replied, looking down at me. He had spoken as though his answer were obvious, but there was something I refused to let slide. He clearly had no intention of protecting me whatsoever. Didn't you say that you were going to protect me and that I didn't need to worry? I exclaimed. It was literally moments ago, and you said it with a great big smile, too. A great big fake smile, too. Even the gods require ample time and preparation before they may save Goduld from Abiglave, not to mention this is your battle for books, is it not? It is, but Lady Handler can't use Chusaria's shield or Anger's blessing. It feels kind of cheap for us to rely on them. In fact, it felt extremely cowardly. Ferdinand scoffed. What are you even saying? Duels are determined by how well one uses what is available to them. I only fight battles where my victory is assured. I know. Then make a shield of wind as soon as you land in your High Beast. You wish to obtain these publishing rights, no? I gave a big nod and produced my panda bus. Ferdinand, Hyacinth, and Handler all produced their High Beasts as well. Is everyone ready? Dunkelfelder called. We all flew down into our respective circles. As the treasurer, Handler and I couldn't leave our designated spots. Doing so would cost us the game. Begin, Dunkelfelder roared, his voice reverberating throughout the training ground. The expecting Dunkelfelder knights erupted in cheers while Ferdinand and Handler and Hyacinth sought toward each other. As Ferdinand had instructed, I poured mana into my ring. O goddess of wind, Shutsaria, protector of all, O 12 goddesses are served by her side. Hear my prayer and lend me your divine strength. Grant me your shield of wind so that I might blow away those who mean to cause harm. Shutsaria's shield formed with a hard metallic clank, and an instant later Ferdinand called out with slight urgency in his voice. Rosemine! What? My eyes had been lowered in prayer, and when I gazed up again, I saw Hyacinth launching a blast of mana at me. I also heard traces of what I thought was Handler letting out her own shrill battle cry, but with the oncoming blob of glowing white mana blocking my line of sight, I couldn't see what was happening. After inhaling sharply, I closed my eyes. I could rely only on my shield to protect me, but the thought of something shooting toward me was still terrifying. As I waited in darkness, there came a sudden, thunderous explosion as mana slammed against Shutsaria's shield. I trembled for a second, then timidly opened my eyes. The blade of blob of mana was gone, such that I could see only the familiar sight of Shutsaria's transparent yellow shield. She blocked Hyacinth's attacks? One of the spectating knights cried, What even is that? It doesn't look like a Gateld. Is it some kind of hemispherical shield? Or second knight ventured. "Look out, Lady Hannelore," shouted a third. It seemed that Hannelore had attacked Ferdinand at the exact same time as Heischitz attacked me, only to trigger a counterattack from his protective charms. Thin beams of light were quickly homing in on her. "Getult," Hannelore cried, producing a shield which she immediately hid behind. She somehow managed to block the counterattack, but she was completely still. I could guess from her reluctance to move and the tears in her eyes that she was overcome with fear. The one saving grace was that her initial attack hadn't been that strong. The charms that had activated doubled the power of the attack they received, so the resulting counterattack wasn't actually that powerful. Thank goodness, I'm so glad Lady Hannelore is safe. I sighed in relief, unable to suppress a smile as I stayed inside Leslie and behind Chitsoria's shield. Ferdinand, however, seemed to be anything but relieved. He was wearing the same look of displeasure he always wore when things didn't go as he expected. He had presumably intended to use the charms to return an attack from Heischitz, not Hannelore. He knew Heischitz would probably start things off with a powerful strike then. After years of experience battling with Heischitz, Ferdinand must have expected to be the target instead. That was presumably why he had taken some of my protective charms. Maybe Heischitz had chosen to attack me because he realized that Hannelore was too far away to do it herself? Or maybe he had just wanted to see how strong my defenses were. I had managed to block his efforts either way, but the unexpected decision had still caught Ferdinand off guard. "Be careful, Heischitz, he's got charms that can counterattack." Again, the Dunkelfelder Knights watching the battle started yelling at advice. They had a good view of the whole battlefield, unlike Heischitz, who had been focusing on attacking me, so they must have seen the charms activate. "That was a counter for physical attacks. Try to avoid those." "No, Lord Ferdinand isn't the kind of man to have two charms with the same effect," Heischitz shouted, replying to the knight's calls at last. "Physical attacks are safer now, if anything." "He's right. I think his keen insight deserves a round of applause." Just as Heischitz assumed, those were the only two charms Ferdinand was wearing, one to counter physical attacks and the other to counter magic attacks. One had now been used up, and not by Heischitz's powerful attack, but by Hannelore's fairly weak cover shot. Eep, I think I just saw Ferdinand click his tongue. Ferdinand moved to attack Hannelore, his expression grim, only to be met by a swift downward slash from Heischitz. Not only was the Dunkelfelder Knight faster, he was more precise too. I could see Ferdinand widen his eyes as he blocked the attack with his own sword, resulting in the sharp wail of metal on metal. A beat later, both men twisted their blades to end the deadlock, and then immediately attacked again. For a second time, Ferdinand blocked Heischitz's attack, this time with an even harsher look. Heischitz's, in contrast, was grinning from ear to ear. "Don't think I'm the same as I was 10 years ago," he said, and then launched into a flurry of attacks. I widened my eyes in shock. Back in Ehrenfest, Ferdinand was completely unrivaled, but here, it took him everything he had just to block and dodge Heischitz's onslaught. He was outmatched in both speed and skill. "That's it, keep it up, you're in the lead. Just make sure he stay close, don't give him time to change weapons." "Yeah, get him, you're faster and better in a sword fight." The spectators continued to lavish their sigh with support. It was easy to discern from their cries that Heischitz was better with a sword than any other weapon. Heischitz's had spent 2 years as a Dunkelfelder Knight since his graduation, and it really showed. He was clearly stronger than Ferdinand, who had mostly spent his time locked away in the temple, helping the Knight's Order only when necessary. Of course, the fact that Ferdinand was managing to block these attacks at all was very impressive, considering that Heischitz seemed to live and breathe battle. But his uneasy expression made it clear that he was being overwhelmed. It was the first time I'd ever seen Ferdinand struggle against an opponent. "I see you reaching for that magic tool, but I won't give you a chance," Heischitz yelled, staying on the offensive so that Ferdinand had no time to wield a magic tool or move a staff. The flashes of white and the loud ringing of clashing blades were enough for me to tell he was launching some incredible attacks, but even with enhancement magic, I was unable to follow them with my eyes. "All that time in the temples made you go soft. Haven't been keeping up with your training?" "No, as I am not a knight," Ferdinand replied. He was trying to speak in his usual tone, but I could notice a slight aggravation behind his words. I took in a large breath of air. He was never usually like this. Just what's going on here? Is he actually going to lose? I had assumed that Ferdinand was going to breeze through this match, so his struggling was the absolute last thing I had expected. My heart pounded with anxiety, and a cold sweat ran down my back. How can I help? What can I do that won't get in his way? I took out my staff and filled it with mana, desperately racking my brain for ideas as Ferdinand continued to be beaten back by Heischitz's strikes. "Look out for Lady Rosemine," a knight called. "She's taken out her staff." I was far enough away that nobody would be able to hear me, so I quietly spoke a prayer. "O God of war Unger, for the God of fire laden shafts exalted 12, I pray thee you grant Ferdinand your divine protection." In an instant, blue light shot out of my staff. I could only hope it would help him in some way. I didn't even ever want to see him lose. Huh? What did she just do? Was that a blessing? As the clamoring knights watched on, Ferdinand recovered some ground thanks to Unger's blessing. He seemed to be less desperate than before, the tension in his expression was gone, and now he looked as stone-faced as usual. Even so, Heischitz's still appeared to have the upper hand. Now what? What else can I help? Once again, I strained to come up with an idea, but Ferdinand interrupted my thoughts with a loud bark. Do not interfere, Rosemine. My victory is assured, so simply wait there until then. Right, I called back and got rid of the staff in my hand, which I had just been moments away from turning into a water gun. Then I allowed the anxiety to drain from my body. Everything's gonna be fine. Ferdinand just said it himself. He never accepts battles he isn't guaranteed to win. I had no reason to doubt him, but I still clasped my hands together as if in prayer. Their high beasts continued to dart through the air, and the shriek of clashing blades seemed endless. Even I could tell that Ferdinand was getting slower, presumably due to the relentless assaults. So it must have been clear as day to the large crowd of spectating knights. They cheered and shouted words of support for their duchy practically on the edge of their viewing seats. Come on, you're so close. Just one more push. Finish him! Their support seemed to make Heishitz even faster. He continued his assault on Ferdinand, who was now breathing heavily, and then cried out as he launched another powerful attack. Ferdinand narrowly avoided it, but now he was wide open. It's over! Heishitz moved in for the finishing blow. Before he could strike his target, Ferdinand grabbed his blue cape and spread it before him. What? Heishitz barked, continuing with his attack would win him the battle, but he would also ruin the blue cape he was fighting for. He paused for a split second, not wanting to slice through his spoils, and that gave Ferdinand the perfect opportunity. A magic tool sparked, causing a small explosion between the two men that threw them in opposite directions. No! Heishitz yelled. He frantically stood up from the dust of the explosion, his confident grin replaced with a look of panic. Ferdinand had also been knocked back, and when he next came into view, his staff was no longer morphed into a sword. Instead, in his hands were magic tools that looked like face stones. The tables have turned, Heishitz, Ferdinand said, now wearing the most overbearing smirk. The arrogance with which he was suddenly carrying himself made it painfully hard to picture him as the hero in this situation. In fact, it seemed to justify his infamous nickname, the Lord of Evil. Thank goodness, this is the Ferdinand I know. I can't believe he used the cape as a shield. That's the Lord of Evil for you, always using dirty tricks. That wasn't even slightly fair, but, well, it was exactly what I wanted to see. Again, the obstreperous crowd roared with excitement. Evidently, this wasn't the first time Ferdinand had done something so underhanded. He had been gasping for breath just moments ago, but now he looked calm and composed. It seemed that tricking Heishitz was his forte. Don't think you'll turn this around that easily, Heishitz stormed. He readied his sword, hoping to reclaim his advantage, but was immediately stopped in his tracks when Ferdinand threw a magic tool at him. A second explosion shook the grounds, but even then, don't think that'll stop me either. Heishitz refused to give up. He charged at Ferdinand, slicing through several more magic tools and forcing his way through the resulting explosion, deftly moving his high beast to close the distance between them. Just get through this. He can't have that many tools on him. He wasn't prepared for a battle. The knight's abrupt cries made me jump, but they were right. Ferdinand must have been working with limited resources. His greatest specialty was setting traps well in advance. But this dinner match had been decided out of nowhere, and in the midst of the introductory tournaments, meaning he hadn't been given time to prepare in his workshop. Things had progressed so suddenly, in fact, that he had even found it necessary to take back some of the charms he had given me. It seemed safe to say that he was an extreme disadvantage. Actually going to be okay? I could feel my chest begin to tighten as anxiety coursed through me, but then it happened. Water gun, Ferdinand murmured, morphing his staff into a very familiar shape. He then squeezed the trigger again and again, firing out one multiplying arrow after another. Whoa, what is this? Heishitz explained. He seemed to be completely stunned in the face of such an alien weapon, but he narrowly avoided its attacks nonetheless. Ferdinand continued to fire the water gun with one hand, expressionless, while throwing magic tools with the other. He must have been calculating where Heishitz would dodge to, so after just a few shots, Heishitz was forced onto the defensive. Unable to determine what kind of weapon the gun was and how to fight against it, the most he could do was evade. What is that thing? One of the knights shouted. I've never seen anything like it before, another cried. As the spectators were swept into a frenzy, Handler called out to them in shock. That looks like the water gun Lady Rosemine made in class, but she said it was a toy, not a weapon. I saw it shoot water, and it didn't do any damage. Ferdinand looked down at her and scoffed. It was modified to be usable as a weapon, and quite a convenient one, I might add. Observe. He took another shot at Heishitz before effortlessly turning the gun on Handler and squeezing the trigger again. A single arrow flew out, divided in number, and then rained down on her. Look out, Lady Handler, I cried on instinct. It's standing up while still inside Leslie. Handler thankfully produced a shield just in time to block the arrows, but as I was sighing in relief, a cold voice crashed over me. Rosemine, who started you on? Sorry, I stammered. My friend was in danger, so it just kind of slipped out. Even then, Ferdinand refused to forgive me. He ordered me not only to avoid making any unnecessary moves, but also to stop shouting out, so I zipped my lips and sat back down. Still, I mean, you're totally the villain here. Who wouldn't want to cheer for the underdog hero? In silence, observing as Ferdinand used his magic tools and water gun to knock Heishitz from his high beast, and then immediately moved to attacking Hannelore. Lady Hannelore, someone help her! I clamped a hand over my mouth and watched with wide eyes. Then suddenly a bright, almost blinding light began arcing toward Ferdinand at a tremendous speed. Haishitz had launched a ball of mana at him even while falling. Wait, no. Alright, good job. The knights were ecstatic about Haishitz's show of perseverance, but I could feel the blood draining from my face. The other charm Ferdinand was wearing countered magic attacks, so it blocked the ball of mana and fired something even more powerful right back at Haishitz. He was still in a free fall, so he had no means of avoiding it. Haishitz, no, he has another charm! As the knights cried out, Haishitz twisted in midair, trying to turn a direct hit into a glancing one. Of course, it was a futile effort. The counterattack struck him head-on and threw him in my direction at unthinkable speed. Eep! I recoiled in fear as the huge man barreled toward me, but a moment later he simply bounced off of Shutsaria's shield and was thrown even further by the wind. After arcing through the air, he struck the ground with such a massive thump that I reflexively leaped to my feet. Are you okay? I called out. I was pretty sure he was alive. I could see him twitching in pain. But his wounds certainly weren't light. He was a mess, but as much as I wanted to cast healing on him, even I wasn't thoughtless enough to restore an enemy during battle. As I eyed Haishitz, I saw him weakly put a rejuvenation potion down his throat. Apparently he had no choice but to wait for it to take effect. May your recovery be swift. I turned my attention from Haishitz to Handler, who was now caught in a staring match with Ferdinand across the treasury boundary line. She was gripping her shield as tightly as she could, her eyes brimming with tears. Haishitz is immobilized, Ferdinand said, his stab readied. If you accept defeat, leave your territory willingly. Despite how much she was trembling from beyond her shield, Handler looked up at him and refused. I am an Archduke Herod of Dunkelfelder. No matter how inevitable defeat may seem, I will never surrender by choice. Ferdinand could only blink in surprise while the spectating knights started to cry out for the umpteenth time that day. Hurrah, Lady Hannelore! That's it! Show him you're a real Dunkelfelderian! Ferdinand heaved a frustrated sigh. Then I have no choice but to force you out. You must settle this before Ehrenfest's match in the Interduchy tournament. Without a moment's hesitation, he shot a band of light from his staff, used it to ensnare Handler, and then flung her out of the duchy's treasure spot like a freshly caught fish. It was a feeling I knew all too well. Ah! Handler cried as she was abruptly swung into the air. Lady Handler! Haishitz groaned. Since drinking the potion, he had recovered just enough to force himself up and sprint over, and he caught Handler just before she hit the ground. Wow, Haishitz is a true man among men, a knight among knights. Of course, Haishitz couldn't slow down and ended up falling over, but Handler remained largely unhurt. That's it, Dunkelfelder declared. Ehrenfest wins. Ehrenfest had won the moment Handler left the treasure circle. I dispelled Shutsaria's shield and flew over to her and Haishitz in my pandabus. Ferdinand, I would like to heal their wounds, I said. May I grant them Hellschmier's blessing? You would do that? Handler asked, blinking in surprise. We would appreciate it, but... She was looking not at me, but at Ferdinand, who conceded with a shrug. Do as you wish, Rosemine. I am used to you showering those around you with compassion, but if you must behave like this, I would rather you show some appreciation to your allies as well. What? I hadn't noticed due to the complete lack of expression on his face, but on closer inspection, Ferdinand was covered in wounds. It baffled me that he managed to look so indifferent when he was clearly very hurt. You should allow yourself to look at least a little injured, Ferdinand. How am I supposed to notice you're in pain otherwise? Never reveal your weakness to your enemies, fool. Well, you didn't reveal it to your ally either, I exclaimed, my cheeks puffed out as I climbed out of Leslie. I sat Ferdinand, Hannelore, and Haishitz down, poured mana into my staff, and then said, may Hellschmier's healing be granted, as I started tending to them one by one. Green light overflowed from my staff and healed their wounds. I thank you, Hannelore said with a cute smile, and stood up once the blessing had eased her weariness. Haishitz was the most wounded, but the blessing restored him all the same. He stood up, looked down at himself, moved his arms and legs, then looked at me with surprise. You seem to have used quite a bit of mana indeed, he said, amazed that he could now move with ease. Thank you, Lady Rosemine. Yes, I also feel fine, Ferdinand agreed. He stood up as well, then told me to return my authorization stone to the Ob and get into my high beast. The battle is settled, and you may discuss the more precise details of your agreement later. For now, if we are to make it in time for the second half of the tournament, we must return to our dormitory for lunch. You wish to see Cornelius's valiant struggle, no? I do. As Ferdinand continued to hurry me, I returned the face stone and jumped into my pandabus. He similarly returned his and climbed into his high beast. Now then, he said, we shall be off. Wait, I want to hear about your new weapon, Haishitz called out. He extended a hand to stop Ferdinand, who paused in the air, turned around, and smirked. I have no reason to tell you anything. If you wish to know, try to seize victory next time. You must train not only your body and mana, but also your mind, for you will never defeat me if you cannot think of more efficient means to battle. Come on, seriously? You taunt him like this and still wonder why he keeps challenging you to duels? Jeez. As we made our way out, I heard the Dunkelfelger Knights shouting vows to challenge Ferdinand again. And it continues. Dude, stop taunting them like that and they won't. Dinner at the Interduchy tournament. Rosamund, give me a rejuvenation potion, Ferdinand said as soon as we returned. You have more in your room, no? Don't you have some of your own, I asked, looking at him quizzically. The blessing worked only to heal wounds and ease pain, not restore mana, so I understood why he would need a potion, but I was pretty sure he always carried his own ones with him. I could use them, but then I would have none left. Now that I have expanded almost all of my magic tools, I would like to keep at least a few rejuvenation potions on my person. He seemed so cool and composed at the time, but could that have been an extremely narrow victory back there? Now understanding the reason for his request, I gave Ferdinand one of the rejuvenation potions hanging from my hip. I also extended an arm and asked whether he needed another charm. No, I would rather not reduce your defenses even more. He then chugged an ultra-nasty potion without so much as the slightest change of expression, handed the empty bottle to Riarda, and asked for a refill. Ferdinand, I said, and instinctively tugged on his sleeve. Do not worry about me, he replied. There are no other duchies that will abruptly challenge me to a dinner match. There was nothing more to say about the matter, so I relinquished my grip on him and smiled in an attempt to lighten the mood. Well, at least there aren't more duchies like Dunkelfelger, I noted. That would really be problematic. Quite the opposite. If there were more, they would surely fight among themselves. It would make my life much easier. Do you think so? I feel that, no matter the situation, Highshits will always challenge you specifically. I do not even wish to consider that. It seemed that everyone else had already finished eating and returned to the tournament, as the dormitory was completely empty. Ferdinand and I rushed to eat, then joined them in the night building where the event was being held. Have we made it, I asked. Yes, Ferdinand replied. Ahrensbach is playing right now, which means Ehrenfest should be playing at the next game. The order for the second half was apparently determined by the results of a mock battle held during classes, and since Ehrenfest had scored rather highly this year, they were due to play later. I observed other duchies socializing on our way to the Ehrenfest spectating area. It was quite fun to watch, since family members wearing colorful clothes stood out amid the usual black of the Royal Academy. They were all wearing styles popular in the sovereignty, but on closer inspection, each had a unique vibe. A Finsturm, Ferdinand said, muttering to himself with a glance toward the arena. This should be over quickly. They are used often during practice. All of the Ernstbach spectators were on their feet and eagerly cheering on their players, so the most I could see were the backs of their light violet capes, and the same colored capes of the participating knights flying through the air on their high beasts. I couldn't even see the Fey Beast or what it looked like, so I soon gave up on watching the fight and focused on walking as quickly as I could. We needed to get back to our own viewing spot before it was Ehrenfest's turn. How do you think Ehrenfest is going to place, I asked. Luck is an enormous factor in this type of dinner. How one knows the Fey creature involved can dramatically change how long it takes them to defeat it. That said, only Fey creatures that can be overwhelmed with raw firepower are ever sent out. It would be much too dangerous for the students to play with beasts they might not even be able to defeat on their own. And the apprentice knights cease to use their brains. It truly is quite a conundrum. With that, we arrived back at Ehrenfest's spot. Sylvester came over the moment he saw us to ask whether he had won our dinner game, and I replied with a big nod. Ferdinand was wonderfully evil, as his nickname would suggest, I said. He used the prized cape as a distraction to throw his enemy off guard, then exploited the opening to launch a counterattack. It reminded me once again that he doesn't have even the slightest amount of chivalry to his name. I am not a knight, remember? I have no need for chivalry, and you cheered my opponent on midway through the fight, did you not? Ferdinand scoffed, narrowing his eyes at me. I would rather you act more the part of a saint. Oh, but did I not produce Sucharia's shield, give Anger's blessing, and even provide Helshmir's healing at the end? I must have come across as the perfect saint to everyone else present. In addition to that, unlike during last year's dinner, I hadn't launched any surprise attacks or given any unsolicited instructions. I had obediently stayed on my high beast and observed the battle from afar. Sylvester raised a hand as if to interrupt my protest. Rosemine, the details of the match can wait. I want to know what was decided afterward. The specifics are going to be ironed out later, I said. Sylvester nodded and then glanced over at Florencia, whose smile broadened at once. Perhaps it was just me, or could I feel a certain intensity radiating from her? That's good, because both sides are going to need some time, he said. I'm sure Ob Dunkelfelder will need to speak to his first wife and retainers as well. The Obs had essentially settled this matter between themselves, and it seemed that their wives were less than pleased. Florencia had apparently cautioned Sylvester against agreeing to the dinner match, which explained the vein bulging on her forehead. Our trade with Dunkelfelder will most certainly come up during the Archduke Conference, with Ob Dunkelfelder requesting a trade deal in return for their listening to your request to some degree. Ferdinand said with a polite and noticeably false smile, I will trust the rest of Ob Ehrenfest's skill in political matters. All of a sudden, a loud cheer reverberated in the air, and we heard Roffin's magic tool-enhanced voice boom through the arena. Ehrenfest, come forth. The apprentice knights had already gathered in the very front of our spot, within viewing distance of the arena floor, and they all climbed into their high beasts and took flight. The number of dark yellow capes on high beasts increased, with the apprentice knights flying loops around the arena. Now, let's see how much they've grown, Karsa said, seeming quite interested. Elvira was a step behind him, having come to see Cornelius' upcoming feats of heroism. First Sylvester and Florencia, then Wilfred and Charlotte moved to fill the gap left by the apprentice knights. There was also space for me to watch as an Archduke candidate, but despite my best efforts, I struggled to see over the strangely high wall separating us from the action. I could have craned my neck and stood on tiptoe, but no Archduke candidate would ever risk doing something so ungraceful. "Milady, here you are," Riarda said as she put a stand in place for me. I climbed atop it, and immediately everything was visible. I could see the apprentice knights getting into position. Thank you, Riarda. Now let's cheer them on." My retainers gathered around me, and together we watched the arena. I was hopeful that we could win, at least I was for a brief moment, and then the professor arrived to make a fake creature atop the magic circle. My heart sank. Waving at the ensuing cheers was none other than Frau Alarm, and she snickered as she looked over at us. I had a really bad feeling about this, and it seemed that I wasn't alone. There were outbursts of, "Oh, come on!" and "horrible people!" from those nearby. "Why is Professor Roffin not making the fake creature?" I asked, my cheeks puffed out. "Because a single professor wouldn't be able to activate enough magic circles for each match," Karstead, who watched the tournament every year, explained. According to Lampert and Cornelius, to prevent trickery, dorm supervisors are never put in charge of their own duchy circle. Everything else is decided by drawing lots, so who gets whom comes down to chance. So in short, Ehrenfest is terrible luck. "Do you think there might be foul play?" I asked. Karstead merely shrugged. "There's not much she can attempt with so many eyes on her," Ferdinand said. "Harmless enough, but isn't that a huge disadvantage her speed did?" I asked. "Ehrenfest was playing 6th from last after doing well in the mock battle. If we performed terribly compared to all the other duchies that had come before us, then our place in the rankings would no doubt be called into question. There's very little to worry about. The apprentices performed admirably even when that one exceptionally rare Fabiest appeared," Ferdinand replied in a low voice. He had nothing but high praise for how we had dealt with the Turnsperfallen, which meant our chances against this Fabiest would greatly depend on whether Lenore recognized it. I swallowed hard as I gazed down at the arena. Fraulein produced her staff and said some spell activating the magic circle. It glowed brightly and then slowly faded to reveal a large wiggly blob. It didn't roar like the previous fake creatures, nor did it launch an immediate attack. I couldn't even see where its head was at first. I assumed Fraulein had simply failed in her attempt to make something. "100 Taelung, huh? Ferdinand muttered, sounding vexed. "This is problematic." Apparently it was a Fabiest that lived near Ansbach's ocean and divided itself each time it was attacked. This would continue until it reached its smallest possible size, and only then could it be killed. It wasn't a very strong Fabiest, but it took forever to kill. "What's that?" someone in the crowd asked. "I've never seen anything like it before." "Is this actually a Fae?" another muttered. As the stirring continued, Fraulein glanced our way for just a single moment before making her exit. Roffin the judge then shouted, "Begin." Lenore gathered everyone together and started to say something while looking down at the completely immobile Traga, then began stirring up their mana as if preparing to launch repeated full-power attacks, as the other apprentice knights scattered, readied their shields, and prepared to endure the aftershock. Lenore did the same, positioning herself right next to Cornelius. "Oh ho, so she knows how to deal with 100 Taelungs then," Ferdinand remarked, his voice making his satisfaction exceedingly clear. "She's very well learned indeed." Attacked at the same time, and then readied his shield for the upcoming shockwave, while Lenore moved forward to shield Cornelius, who was building up mana again. This is a battlefield, but it feels like they're in their own little world. And it seemed like I wasn't the only person who thought so. Elvira was letting out coos of delight beside me, presumably making a mental note of material for a new book. Cornelius readied his mana-filled sword from behind Lenore's shield, and then swung it with a thunderous, "Yeah!" A second blob of mana, which seemed a bit smaller than the first, flew toward the 100 Taelung. There came a loud explosion a mere moments later, and a number of tiny creatures scattered all over as if riding the shockwave. "Aim for the heads," Matthias shouted. "Act fast before they have time to remerge." The gathered apprentice knights began moving all at once. The 100 Taelung, once a squishy blob, had become a multitude of miniature snakes, which would apparently form together to become one big snake if given the opportunity. Traga and Cornelius' full-power attacks had successfully split it into its smallest forms. The only way to defeat 100 Taelung is to separate it into its composite parts and destroy them all, Ferdinand explained. Failing to separate it completely results in an unnecessary swarm that will simply fuse back together again and again and achieve nothing but exhausting all those involved. Instead, to be victorious, one must strike it with a strong enough mana attack to fully divide it. I nodded along while looking down at the fight. The apprentice knights were having a rough time since they needed to kill the tiny, scattered snakes without letting them reform. Thankfully, it seemed that a single stab to the head was enough to finish each one off. It looked so easy that even I could have managed it. Probably not fast enough, but you could have done it. Cornelius withdrew to chug a rejuvenation potion and then began flying around the arena. Meanwhile, Lenore shouted, "Fall back, those in front of me." Before swinging and throwing something, it blew up open in the air and spread wide. A net, I asked myself. Something resembling the net that Ferdinand had used to defeat a horde of babies that once, on the night of Chitsaria, had spread out and seized a bunch of the smaller Hunter-Tailungs. Lenore then let out a shout, and a moment later, all the blobs she had trapped were exterminated. She repeated this 3 more times, targeting the densest clumps, and left Matthias in charge and retreated to a safe distance to recover her mana. "That net requires quite a lot of mana," Cardstead muttered, impressed. "I didn't notice during her normal training, but I see Lenore's capacity has grown quite a bit." Ivara's dark eyes sparkled, and she let out a happy sigh. She must have worked so hard to catch up to Cornelius. Love truly makes a woman strong. I am moved by the mental fortitude of a young woman in love who wishes to match her partner's mana as closely as possible. I must write this down. Oh, rest in peace, Cornelius Lenore. Your relationship is going to be on paper. Cornelius had kept his relationship a secret from me for an entire term, fearing that Alvara might find out about it. I saw no reason to intervene for his benefit. Of course, I wasn't going to let anything happen that would make life in the dormitory hard for Lenore. Florencia had asked me to promise her that much. But as for the rest, I would simply sit and watch. As soon as Lenore graduates next year, Cornelius is in for a world of suffering. His romance is going to be turned into a book sooner or later. Aha, Judith is going all out too, Cardstead exclaimed. Your guard knights are something else, Rosemine. Attention to the arena and saw Judith holding knives between her fingers, throwing one after another at the blobs. Each one struck a tiny Hunter-Tailung square in the head, causing the snakes to evaporate. Judith, they are scattered far apart at 3-1-1. Clean them up, Matthias said, flying up a little higher than everyone else and giving instructions to Lenore's place. Tragat, some are merging at 2-5-1. Stop them. Rudolph, some are sticking to the walls. Deal with 6-4-3. Natalie, 1-4-2. Targot had refused to follow any orders last year. Obeying the instructions of a Mend Knight probably went to show just how much he had grown. Y'all are gonna get in trouble, little boys! What are those numbers Matthias is saying, I asked. They reflect the space in the arena, Ferdinand replied. I use them often myself. They make it easier to give orders and translate well to Gwen in demonstrations and post-game meetings. It is fortunate that male socializing involves Gwenin so heavily. Ah, did Matthias and everyone else start using them because they've been referencing Ferdinand's guides? Interesting. Well, how do they know where to go when there aren't any lines or symbols? I wouldn't be able to respond to such random numbers so quickly. I said there was a circle for the Fae Beast, a circle for the Knights to wait in, and a line between them, but no other markers to serve as visual cues. If someone had belted off a string of numbers like that to me, I wouldn't have had even the slightest idea of where to go. There were a few female knights in my day who struggled to follow them, as your female knights are struggling now, and it took much practice before they can move as soon as they were instructed. There is nothing one can do but train until it makes sense. Cornelius and Lenore recovered their mana and started assisting with killing the remaining Hunter-Tailungs until eventually only one remained. Judith, there's the last one, Matthias called. Without missing a beat, Judith threw a knife at the snake before piercing its head with perfect accuracy. At that instant, the glowing magic circle dulled. Ehrenfest finished, Roffin boomed. Those of us watching from Ehrenfest's spot moved aside so that our apprentice knights would have space to land. They returned one after another, while those wearing Hochschlitz capes took their place in the arena. Once the apprentices had put their high beast away, they knelt in front of Sylvester and Florencia. Ehrenfest, my apologies, Cornelius said, speaking as a 6-year and their representative. We did not push our ranking as much as we had hoped. No need to apologize, Sylvester replied. You expertly dealt with a Fae Beast that nobody in Ehrenfest except Ferdinand knows about, and on your first encounter with it as well. It is clear that you've been studying hard and training often. You have more mana, skill, and coordination than last year. Well done. We are honored by your words. Cornelius and the other apprentices then bowed in unison. Sylvester nodded and looked at Cardstead. Tell me, what are your thoughts as a knight commander? Cardstead's normal place was behind Sylvester as his guard knight. Then here he stepped forward, having been granted an opportunity to speak. He planted his feet firmly on the ground, looked down at the apprentice knights, and said, There is no denying that the introductory tournament values speed above all else, and your battles was far from a quick one, but that mostly came down to bad luck. You all fought unbelievably well, considering that it was your first time encountering this particular Fae Beast. There is still room for improvement, but you have proven that you can follow orders and carry out your individual roles while keeping an eye on what the others are doing. Your growth is clear and steady. Keep up the good work. Yes, sir. Once the apprentice knights have dispersed, it was time for us to return to our tables and socialize again. Wilfred and Charlotte discussed the heroic efforts of the apprentice knights as they headed to the frontmost table, while the rest of us went to the ones further back. Now that I've seen the whole dormitory work together and making progress with my own eyes, Sylvester muttered, I do feel bad about the former Veronica faction children not getting the mana compression method. It was rare for a duchy to have 3 archduke candidates without splitting up into several factions that refused to assist one another. Children grow differently before and after their graduation, and given that they would one day be the adults running Ehrenfest, Sylvester wanted them to start growing their mana as soon as possible. It'll be rough, but he continued and then trailed off. The most I could do was nod in agreement. Oh, Hartman's married partner. Oh, wait. Is this? Hold on. Dang, I did a whole bunch. Hartman's marriage partner. No sooner had Ferdinand and I arrived at our seats than attendants began busily moving around us, preparing to resume socializing. Hartman arrived a moment later. Lady Rosemine, he said, I would like to introduce you to the woman I'm escorting. Do you have a moment? Oddly made it seem like you were courting quite a number of girls, I replied. Have you managed to narrow it down to one? I'm glad you were not violently stabbed in the process. Hartman met my response with wide eyes, then put on a bright smile and placed his right hand on his chest. Please do not frame it like that, Lady Rosemine. My name is with you. To me, my life is yours always. Don't steal Roderick's emotional lines. Enough, Ferdinand said to us, both waving his hand dismissively. Hartman would not have you meet just anyone. I imagine that he intends to marry this woman. By formally introducing her to me, his boss, he was proving that their connection was far more than just the escort. His aim was for their parents to meet so that they can discuss progressing things towards marriage. I, too, wish to know what manner of woman the ever-loyal Hartman has chosen. Understood. Hartman went to where the other scholars were gathered and returned with the girl wearing a Dunkelfelder cape. I couldn't help but think that she looked somewhat familiar, and as it turned out, she had been one of the apprentice scholars in attendance at Handelor's tea party. She had scorched brown hair that was done in a long braid behind her head, and eyes that were the same blue color as her cape. She was almost Hartman's height, which meant she was rather tall, and her face was flushed red with embarrassment as she walked a half-step behind him. Overall, she radiated a lovely sense of innocence. Oh, Lord, you have no idea. Dunkelfelder. Ferdinand spat under his breath, drawing my attention to him. Its women tend to be highly calculating. It is impossible to say how much intelligence she will attempt to wring out of us. The question is, can Hartman contain her? Ferdinand. Did a girl from Dunkelfelder hurt you in the past or something? No. Such is merely the prevailing opinion. It was said that everyone else who interacted with Dunkelfelder came away thinking it was a duchy of very manipulative women. I couldn't quite understand it, though. Handelor was the only girl from Dunkelfelder who I really knew, and she had never given me reason to think she was conniving. I am Clarissa, a fifth-year apprentice scholar from Dunkelfelder, she said. In a shocking twist, Hartman's partner was the very same woman who had given me her duchy stories. My opinion of her immediately shot up when I realized that I had already read something of her writing. Clarissa and I exchanged greetings, after which she said with a face full of emotion, At last I've finally been introduced to you, Lady Rosemine. I'm overjoyed. Does your coming here mean you're settled on marrying Hartman, Clarissa? I asked. How did you come to such a decision? Simply out of curiosity, of course. I couldn't outright say that I thought he was a total weirdo and that her interest in him seemed strange, so I resorted to more indirect means. Do you remember the game of dinner you played with Dunkelfelder last year, Lady Rosemine? Clarissa asked. Yes, of course. Perhaps they had gotten close while sharing information over dinner. It was strange, but absolutely feasible. I was moved beyond words when I saw the fight, she said, now blushing heavily. Much to my surprise, what followed wasn't a conversation about meeting Hartman. Rather, it was an impassioned speech about how splendid and magnificent she had found me. I, the tiniest girl in the Royal Academy, had used devious plots to toy with Dunkelfelder's apprentice knights. She recounted this fact with sparkling blue eyes. Lady Rosemine, after that fateful encounter, I had resolved to marry an Ehrenfest man so that I might one day serve you, she concluded. What? So it has nothing to do with Hartman. Clarissa had then begun gathering intelligence from her search for a man who met her criteria. It would take too much time for her to marry someone younger, meaning that needed to be her age or older, and since she wanted to serve me after marriage, he would ideally need to be my retainer. Hold on. He also needed to be someone her parents would approve of, considering Ehrenfest's rank. It wasn't uncommon for even fellow archnobles to have wide gaps in their mana capacity. The only two men who suited her needs were Cornelius and Hartman, both archnoble honor students. Cornelius had turned her down since he already had someone else, but Hartman was a free man who spent his time getting friendly with girls from other duchies to collect intelligence of his own. I asked Hartman to date me with the expectation of marriage, Clarissa continued. I nodded in response, listening intently, only to be taken by surprise when Elvira suddenly spoke from behind me. Yes, and then? She's like a ninja, I swear. We didn't even notice her coming. I turned around and saw her taking notes with a businesslike expression, much like one of my scholars. How did you convey your feelings to Hartman, Elvira asked. Hartman was the one who replied, and his eyes grew somewhat distant as he spoke. Clarissa was more intense than any woman I've ever met. She suddenly kicked my feet out from under me, pinned me to the ground, and thrust a knife against my throat. What? I asked. For a moment, I didn't know what had happened, he continued. Clarissa had apparently held him down with her body weight, and while holding a blade to his throat, demanded that he give her missions to complete to earn his hand in marriage. Hartman, feeling that his life was in danger, had no choice but to comply. In the end, not only had Clarissa completed every challenge she was assigned, but she had also eliminated the other girls Hartman was friendly with one by one, thereby removing all rivals for his affection. Wait, did she scare them away? Or, I'm assuming she scared them away. Because I doubt they would let her get away with murder. Or assault. It seemed that to Clarissa, love was something won through intensity and guts, not displays of romance. So, in Dunkelfelder, girls can be the dominant ones when it comes to starting romances. That's news to me, but that's also not something I really wanted to know. Clarissa looks like such a normal girl at first, too. I completed his missions and could finally date him with marriage in mind, and now he is introducing me to you at the introductory tournament, Lady Rosemine. Clarissa said shyly, as if embarrassed to talk about her own romance like this. Not that I found what she was saying even the slightest bit romantic. I just can't believe that our relationship started with cutthroat bloodshed. I looked at Hartman, who was standing next to Clarissa. He seemed so at ease, but was he really fine marrying a girl who had shoved a knife to his face? Hartman, how do you feel about this marriage, I asked. It seems like your meeting was quite shocking and dramatic, so... It certainly was, but no matter how many times I extolled your virtues at length, Clarissa always listened with great interest. I also can't imagine our decisions to prioritize you above each other will ever become a point of contention for us. I couldn't hope for a better marriage partner. Oh, jeez. I want to celebrate Hartman getting married, but this really doesn't seem like a pairing I should encourage. As I contemplated the situation, Clarissa looked straight at me, her shy expression suddenly hardening. Perhaps she thought I was going to oppose their union, but before I could even respond, her eyes gleamed with the kind of rigid determination I had come to expect from Dunkelfelderians. I understand that marrying Hartman does not automatically mean I get to serve you, Lady Rosemine, she said, but being able to enter your service is my greatest wish. One that I hope to realize no matter the cost. I asked Hartman to arrange this meeting so that I could convey this to you. From there, Clarissa began to sing her own praises. She had become an apprentice scholar after failing the selection exam for apprentice knights, but still favored the sword more than the pen. So she had started training with the other knights anyway. Now she could double as both a scholar and a guard, and she made sure to note that she would serve as a valuable asset for negotiations between our two duchies. Wait, what? Wasn't this supposed to be about marriage? It feels like I'm overseeing a work interview. You claim to be a scholar of the sword, someone who can serve as a guard as well, but what are your scholarly skills in particular, Ferdinand asked. Pray tell, what research are you prioritizing for your graduation next year? He must have shared my thoughts about this, seeming like an interview, as he began probing her for more and more details on what kind of research she was doing. It turned out she was looking into magic tools and circles to assist with area of effect magic. I have worked this hard to ensure that Lady Rosemond will accept me not just as a scholar, but as her scholar, Clarissa said, holding out a sizable stack of papers. To that end, I have transcribed all the books my family owns. There were 2, excluding those that Hartman tells me are already available in Ehrenfest. I brought these with me for this introduction. Good, Miss Hartman, what a lovely and passionate young woman you have found, I said at once. And Clarissa, even though you have already given me wonderful stories before, you went out of your way to transcribe even more books for me. You're hired. Stop, fool. You are being too rash, Ferdinand chided me. At least view the contents before you praise them. I gleefully accepted the stack of papers from Clarissa and started skimming through them, all the while considering the idea of her marrying Hartman and becoming my retainer. In truth, I really couldn't see there being any downside for Ehrenfest. Aside from the minor inconvenience of there being a second female version of Hartman running around. Your handwriting is clear, and your transcriptions are well done, I observed. Furthermore, I believe that Ehrenfest could benefit from having a connection to Dunkelfelder. What do you say to this, Ferdinand? I gazed up at him, nervous that he might oppose the idea, while Clarissa did the same. He was my guardian, so he had the final say on the matter. I am somewhat uneasy about trusting a scholar of the sword with negotiations, but Hartman should provide his support. If you wish to accept Clarissa, then you may do so. Clarissa turned to look at me, her blue eyes brimming with hope. In that case, I said, once you marry Hartman and move to Ehrenfest, I will accept you as my retainer. I thank you ever so much, Clarissa said, her face flushing red with joy. With that settled, Hartman stepped forward. Lord Ferdinand, Raymond visited a moment ago, he said. If you have the time, he wishes to deliver his completed work in person. Bring him. The couple left together for Ehrenfest Scholar Space. As they went, I could see Clarissa happily saying something to Hartman, and him respond in turn. Are most Dunkelfogger girls like Clarissa? I asked. Ferdinand frowned. She is very different from the Dunkelfogger women I know. She has the mind of a knight above all else, and her means of proposing marriage was unusual to say the least. It really was a shock to learn that she conveyed her feelings to Hartman at knife point. Yes, quite, Avara said. Goodness, how am I supposed to write this? She looked equally as troubled as she walked off, but in my opinion there was no need to force this into a sappy romance story. It would probably work better as a how-to guide for winning over boys, an essential read for men of other duchies at risk of courting from Dunkelfogger girls. Lord Ferdinand, Lady Rosamund, we have brought Raymond, Hartman said, having returned with him in tow. Clarissa was still with him, since she wanted to see how skilled of a scholar one needed to be to earn Ferdinand's and my approval. We were valuing Raymond very highly, despite him being from another duchy, and to Clarissa he was a rival to use as fuel for self-improvement. Guess this makes them like Ferdinand and Hyacinth? Kinda? Raymond was smartly dressed and wearing his light violet cape, but his face was pale and showed clear signs of sleep deprivation. He had doubtless been researching up until the very last moment so that he could deliver the task to Ferdinand directly. After greeting us with a nervous look, Raymond preferred his work. Ferdinand took it and began looking it over, while Hartman and Clarissa peered at the submitted magic circle with great interest. I joined them since this task had come at my suggestion, modifying a teleportation circle to be smaller and more mana efficient. Your improvements are decent, Ferdinand said. However, if one adds this form to the magic circle here, one could enable mana assistance from face stones and ultimately lessen the burden on the user. Face stone assistance? The task was to provide a magic circle that even lay nobles can use with ease. Would face stones be that easy for them to acquire? I would assume so. They are simple face stones, Ferdinand replied, but his opinion here could hardly be relied on. He was privileged enough to have an abundance of mana and resources, and his thoughts on the matter were unlikely to account for this. I was about to mention this when Clarissa interjected. Even commoners can kill fey beasts and take their face stones, so having an assisting magic circle would be for the best. And I mean, heck, commoners can kill some of the fey beasts. I think Lutz and Thule were talking about how they could kill shoe mills. Shoe mills are fey beasts. Commoners can obtain fey beasts? Or obtain fey stones? To what end? Ferdinand asked. Both he and Raymond were staring at Clarissa in surprise. But of course, they can encounter fey beasts when they hunt in the forest, and even defeat the weaker ones on their own. There are shops in the city that purchase fey stones from them, so I don't see why lay nobles wouldn't be able to manage. Wowee, Dunkelfogger must have a strong commoners too. I'm so glad I wasn't reincarnated into that duchy. I would definitely be dead right now. Definitely. If you still had the devouring, definitely. There are fey stone stores in the lower city where commoners live, Ferdinand asked, blinking in confusion alongside Raymond. Perhaps such stores weren't a thing in Ahrensbach or Ehrenfest. I had once lived in the lower city myself, but I had spent so much of my time indoors that there was little I could say about it. All you have to do is ask Benno about it, and he could probably direct you to where you need to go. In any case, Ferdinand concluded his evaluation by telling Raymond to investigate whether even low-quality fey stones would work, and to add the assisting circle to his existing work if so. As for your new task, Rosamund, is there anything else you need? Ferdinand asked. The ball was now in my court, perhaps because he couldn't think of anything without his documents at hand. I gave a big nod as an endless stream of ideas came to mind. I would like for you to improve the library magic tools that feature in the documents I borrowed from Professor Solange, I said, and then started to describe each one. There was a great variety, some that told the time using lights, some that cleaned the grounds, some that quieted the voices in the reading room, some that stopped time to prevent old documents from rotting, some that stopped the sunlight from damaging the books, and so on. So, what are the magic circles like? Raymond asked. They weren't illustrated in the documents I read, so I couldn't tell you. The most I can say is that I want magic tools that can help in the running of a library. Professor Solange will also benefit from tools that require less mana. Ferdinand sighed. I have several illustrations of magic tools used in libraries. I will supply your next task based on those, he said to Raymond. Apparently, Herscher's teacher's teacher's teacher had made some of the magic tools used in the library, and Ferdinand still had a few documents on them. Perhaps it'd be wise to visit the library to investigate this further, Raymond said, forming his plans with a sparkle in his eyes. Hopefully the magic circles are somewhere they can be easily observed. I don't know. Lord Ferdinand, Clarissa added, please grant me a task as well. Get your tasks from Rosemine. You wish to be a Rosemine's retainer, not my disciple, Ferdinand replied flatly. She turned to me with a look of almost overbearing desperation. In the end, I decided to task her with creating a magic tool that would capture anyone who tried leaving the library with a book they hadn't checked out properly. The last few games of dinner concluded while we were busy with our discussion. Roffin's booming announcement filled the arena, informing everyone that things were over. The award ceremony will soon take place, he said. Students descend to the arena grounds after fifth bell. In the meantime, we were supposed to do a quick cleanup. Apprentice scholars began collecting the precious magic tools that had taken out of the research announcements, while the apprentice attendants started cleaning up the silverware and sweets that had been served. Now then, you two, return to your duchies, Ferdinand prompted Clarissa and Raymond. They complied, but the reluctance was clear on their faces. Apparently they had been quite enjoying our conversation. I had enjoyed it myself since it was about magic tools for the library. No sooner had fifth bell rang than Wilfred and Charlotte rose to their feet, having been anxiously waiting the entire time. Let's go to the arena, Rosemine, Wilfred said. I imagine things will get crowded if we all go at once, so please go on ahead, I replied. I trust you can keep your students in order down there. Charlotte, please handle the flow of traffic. I will remain here for as long as possible to preserve my stamina. Wilfred and Charlotte nodded in agreement, then began giving out instructions. My most important duty here was preserving my stamina, such that I didn't collapse in front of royalty. After confirming that most of our students had reached the grounds, Ferdinand turned to me. It is about time. Once you have descended, we will observe from the front, he said. It seemed that guardians would go to the front of the arena and watch the award ceremony from above, like we had done during the dinner matches. I can only hope that many of our own are recognized as honor students this year, I said, and stood up. At that moment, one of the charms hanging from my arm was activated. It flashed to life, then fired a bright bluish-white arrow, much like when it had automatically activated against Roffin. What? I blinked in surprise as Ferdinand suddenly pulled me to him. Eckert simultaneously drew his staff and went in the defensive, followed by a bait later by Cornelius, Lenore, and Judith. There came a stunned exclamation from somewhere relatively nearby. Cornelius and Lenore sprinted over to find its source, while Judith stayed behind to keep me safe. It wasn't long before Cornelius returned, dragging along a student who had taken the brunt of my counterattack. This is the culprit who attacked Lady Rosemine. No, I didn't mean to attack an Archduke candidate, the student replied, having turned pale from the unexpected turn of events. He was an archnoble from Immerdink, the previous 10th duchy that was now irritated at Ehrenfest for surpassing it. How apparently this change in rankings has caused a girl from a greater duchy to break up with him, and now his anger and resentment were directed at Hartmut, who was now due to marry a girl from a greater duchy himself. The student from Immerdink had apparently tried to throw a face stone at Hartmut's leg in a sudden fit of rage, only for his target to inadvertently move aside. It had struck me instead, which had, of course, activated my charm. No matter who the boy was, he was pretty dang unlucky. Although it hadn't been his intention, he had just attacked an Archduke candidate from another duchy. Off without any repercussions, but at the same time, there was also no need for me to make a fuss right before this award ceremony. It seemed best to let the adults deal with things later. While this boy brought much pain to himself, I am unhurt, so I have no intention of administering further punishment, I said. Ob Ehrenfest, you may bring this matter to Ob Immerdink. I was going to leave the rest with him and Ferdinand before I could fly down to the arena. Ferdinand tightened his grip on my arm and pulled me closer. Rosemine, he warned in a quiet voice. I believe that was your last charm for reflecting physical attacks. Take care not to leave your guard knights under any circumstances. It is impossible to say how other duchies jealous of the change in rankings will react. Cornelius nodded with a hard expression, responding in my stead. Unforeseen consequences. I could tell from the clumps of different colors that most students had already descended to the arena grounds for the award ceremony. Ehrenfest was a dark yellow blob of capes, and since Wilfred and Charlotte had been the first to leave our viewing spot, I assumed they were already among them. I see Ehrenfest is over there, I remarked. Please descend toward that circle by Hybeast, Hartmut said, leading the apprentice scholars and apprentice attendants down. I followed after them a moment later, surrounded by guard knights. Once all the students were lined up, royalty entered. The arena was quickly surrounded by knights flourishing black capes and Hybeasts, with widely spread wings descended one after another. It was obvious which one was the king. He had the sovereign knight commander, Roblet, guarding him, and came out before Anastasius and Eglantine. He's even younger than I thought. From appearances alone, he looked to be no older than Karlstad. And although his features resembled those of Anastasius, they were noticeably harder and more dignified. He and his first wife, along with all the other royals, descended onto a platform wearing thick, heavy-looking outfits. There was Prince Digiswald and his wife, as well as Prince Anastasius and his fiancée Eglantine. Hildebrand would apparently be sitting this one out, since he hadn't yet attended his debut. Abigail, the god of life, grants his harsh judgment each winter, and your gathering here today means you haven't all endured it. The award ceremony began with a greeting from the king. His clear voice, magnified by a magic tool, echoed throughout the arena grounds. My heart pounded with excitement as I gazed up at him and the other royals, taking in the atmosphere of my first award ceremony. Eglantine was a sight to behold even from this distance, and as I saw the prayer pin Tuli had made standing out against her golden tresses, I couldn't help but sigh in awe. And then out of nowhere, several thunderous explosions shook the arena. One by one, pillars of roaring flames shot in the air. 2 from among the audience seats, and another from the arena grounds where we students were standing. All were far from where Ehrenfest was gathered, but the sudden noise made me turn on instinct. I could see the fires rising. There was a moment of complete silence, then people began to scream. The air was filled with their ear-splitting shrieks while the guard knights around me each barked Getolt to ready their shields and moved into a defensive formation around me. The nearby students came to their senses in a beat later and produced their own shields to protect themselves while the apprentice knights moved to protect the other Archduke candidates. O goddess of wind Shitsaria, protector of all, O 12 goddesses who serve by her side. As my 3 guard knights continued to protect me, I started intoning the prayer to make Shitsaria's shield. My efforts were interrupted, however, when another loud explosion sounded out from nearby. The apprentice scholars and attendants had shields of their own, but without the necessary combat training, they were unable to stop themselves from being flung back. I instinctively reached out for them, but... No, Lenore shouted. Please remain still, Lady Rosamine. You are the one in danger. Your safety is of our highest priority, Judith added, her face sternly set. Lord Boniface has said so. Guard knights exist to protect the archducal family. Scholars and attendants come later. They were entirely right, and I retracted my hand just as more explosions resounded across the arena. This time there was no fire, only the violent tremors of each blast. This made no difference to the panicked students, of course. The screams and chaos continued to intensify. Calm down. Safety first. Healing comes later. I closed my eyes, trying to block the wounded from my thoughts, and repeated the prayer, O goddess of wind Shitsaria, protector of all, O 12 goddesses who serve by her side. Hear my prayer and lend me your divine strength. Grant me your shield of wind so that I might blow away those who mean to cause harm. There was a metallic clink as Shitsaria's translucent shield formed around us. It was only as large as our designated spot on the arena grounds, and as it was circular, those standing in the corners outside its perimeter weren't given any shelter. Can everyone from Ehrenfest fit inside, I asked. Prioritize the first years who can't yet form their own shields, and as many defensive apprentice scholars and attendants as possible. Or defenseless ones. In my instructions, the older apprentice knights left the safety of the shield to begin herding the first years inside. Meanwhile, Cornelius and my other nearby retainers gazed at my creation with wonder. Lady Rosamine, what is this? Shitsaria's shield, I replied. It's a little bigger than what we get from chanting Getolt, whatever. That's quite an understatement, sister, Charlotte noted in an exasperated tone, evidently comparing my shield to the one the apprentice knights were using. The shield, which means we are safe inside. But in any case, some were hurt before I could form it, were they not? Please bring them to me. I shall heal them at once. We are not injured enough to warrant your concern, one of the wounded attempted to protest. These are mere bumps and scrapes, nothing for you to waste your mana on. But I was unwilling to budge on the matter. There is no knowing when we might be called to action, so we must keep ourselves at full strength. Are the apprentice knights who played Ditter all fully recovered? Use your rejuvenation potions now while we still can. None can say what might soon happen. We are honored, Lady Rosamine. With Shitsaria's shield produced and the wounded healed, Ehrenfest's safety was secured at least for now. I used the brief moment we had been afforded to examine our surroundings and quickly deduced that the other duchies had either fallen into chaos or promptly formed defensive positions. There was no in-betweens. Those from Dunkelfelder were already clad in armor with their shields at the ready and withdrawing to their audience seats by high beast in orderly formation, as anyone would expect from a population of such battle-ready warriors. The duchies whose viewing spots were now engulfed in flames, however, were unsure where to retreat to. Their defenseless apprentice scholars and attendants had been thrown into a massive panic. Ah, a fey beast! Kill it! You lot are in the way! Move! We heard shouts from all over, and the apprentice knights around me readied for battle again. What? It got bigger? This thing, here of all places? A hulking form began to rise up amid the chaos, similar in appearance to a black dog, and with small different-colored eyes on its forehead that flitted about in all directions. There was no mistaking it. It was a Trnishbafon, again. Where did this one come from? What am I saying? It's probably going to pop up in a minute. Who brought him? The explosions alone had thrown the arena into chaos, and this unfamiliar fey beast had seemed immune to all attacks that plunged the apprentice knights into a terror beyond controlling. Their chain of command was shattered. Do not attack it! Get out of our way! Shouted the sovereign knights, but their words fell on deaf ears. The students were launching one frantic attack after another, while the Trnishbafons sucked at their mana and continued to grow. As the beast roared, the sovereign knights were already taking action with their black weaponry at the ready. It seemed that they had divided themselves into 2 teams. one charged with protecting the royals, and the other while slaying the Trishperfallen, but they were being held back by the panicking apprentice knights in their wild attacks. Lady Rosemont, can you grant us black weaponry? The Airfest apprentice knights asked me. They had defeated the Trishperfallen before, and were sure they could be of some assistance. I cannot, I replied. The king has forbidden us from using it. But the Trishperfallen lunged at some students, its mouth opened wide as it attempted to snap them up. An attack from a sovereign knight knocked it off course just in time, preventing any casualties, but the battle was far from over. I instinctively produced my staff, and a moment later a black mass appeared near the stage where the king was still standing. Without even the slightest hesitation, all the sovereign knights who had been trying to kill the Trishperfallen in the arena turned around and worked their way back to the stage, prioritizing royalty over the students. Lady Rosemont, please grant us black weapons to defeat the Trishperfallen near us. Would you abandon them? As much as I didn't want to leave the students to fend for themselves, apprentice knights weren't taught to make black weaponry. Even back in Ehrenfest, they weren't allowed to use them at all. Wielding such weapons here in the Royal Academy simply wasn't an option, especially in front of the king himself. I pursed my lips and looked up at the audience seats where the adults with power were. We underage students couldn't do anything, but perhaps they could. Sylvester, Ferdinand. It was then that a booming voice came from somewhere behind me and echoed throughout the arena. We shall assist the Sovereign Knight's order. To that end, we request permission to wield black weapons. I turned to see blue capes lined up in sharp rows, with Ob Dunkelfugger standing at the front. They had their weapons ready, and it was clear that they would leap down as soon as they were told to... Sortie? What the heck is sortie? We permit duchies with black weapons to use, and the king declared in response, defeat the Darkness Fey Beast. Understood. Now, with royal permission, the blue-caped Dunkelfugger knights descended upon the arena. I was a bit uncertain about whether it was proper for an Ob to lead a Fey Beast hunt, especially when it meant leaving the women scholars and such alone, but on closer inspection, the duchy students had already met up with their guardians in the audience seats, and the apprentice knights were looking after the non-combat personnel. Their expert coordination put them on a completely different level from anyone else. As I watched the Dunkelfugger knights with my mouth agape, Ferdinand descended with Eckert and justice. I came out of concern that you might grant the apprentices black weapons, but I see you were thoughtful this time, he said. Tell me, what is the situation? The apprentice knights all gave uncomfortable looks, having been repeatedly asking me for black weapons. Some were scraped or bruised when caught up in the explosions, I replied, but I have healed them, and they can now mobilize in any moment. Shall we go to the audience seats? No, there is a Trishperfallen up there as well, albeit not a large one. The duchies granted permission to use black weapons are already working on slay these beasts, so leave the matter to them and wait here. Hearing his clearly stated orders was enough to make me sigh of relief. Having even just one reliable adult around made things so much better. Dunkelfugger certainly has a lot of knights, I observed. They leave only the bare minimum at their duchy so that they can bring as many as they can here to observe the dinner matches. Ferdinand said, I consider their obsession with dinner to be nothing but a cause for exasperation. But I see now that their enthusiasm can sometimes be helpful. To be frank, I find it quite heartening to see such a sizable knight's order capable of operating with complete coordination even during an unexpected situation like this. In contrast, Ehrenfest had only brought as many knights as was needed to protect the Archducal couple and the parents who had come to watch their children in the tournament. Barely anyone had the power to participate in the baby slaying. They're quite strong, I said. Are we just going to leave things to them? Ferdinand glared at the Trishperfallen by the stage, his expression hard. A moment later, Wilfried, who had been keeping an eye on our surroundings, shouted, Uncle, there's a Trishperfallen here. I turned and saw people screaming as the beast, who had suddenly emerged nearby. It was dangerously close to us, having appeared in Imberding's spot. Some green-caped students desperately tried to fly away by High Beast, only to be knocked down while others struggled to escape the gnashing teeth coming straight for them. Move aside, we're forming our High Beast. Close your ears, all of you. None must hear the black spell. Eckert and Ferdinand instantly produced their weapons, and after pausing to form their High Beast, sprang into action. They cast the black weapon spell while all the students were covering their ears, and then jumped into their High Beasts. Ehrenfest students do not leave Rosemond's shield no matter what. For everyone had now gathered the Trishperfallen grew when attacked, but some couldn't help but retaliate when one got close. Ferdinand had swung his weapon to launch an attack, but in that moment the Trishperfallen swelled in size. Lord Ferdinand, Eckert cried and yelled in a panic. The beast's suddenly massive claws had torn through the cape Ferdinand was wearing, the one that was completely devoid of protective charms, unlike his usual blue one. This is why he needed to wear the blue one! I remembered that he had mentioned feeling unsafe wearing it, and this clearly demonstrated why. The color drained from my face, my eyes were wide, and my mouth hung open. I was unable to speak. I am fine, Ferdinand said. Let us finish this in one blow, Eckert. It seems we have no time to simply watch. Ferdinand recovered at once, as if making a point that he didn't need my concern, and soared high into the air while pouring mana into his black weapon. The Trishperfallen must have noticed the dense mana above it, as several of its eyes started following his movements. Come, Karstedt, Ferdinand shouted during his ascent. Karstedt was tasked with Karlstadt was tasked with protecting the Archducal family and was dealing with the Turnishbefallen in the spectating area. But even so, he flew over at once with his black weapon in hand. He and Ferdinand seemed to coordinate without exchanging any words or signals. Presumably, they were well accustomed to their particular roles when fighting together, and clearly silently moved into position while readying a full-power attack. "Brace yourselves, everyone," Ferdinand warned. "This blast will affect all, whether friend or foe." Speed was an absolute priority here, since the Turnishbefallen was surrounded not by trained knights, but by a crowd of confused students. Ferdinand declared that he would wipe it out in a single blow, no matter how much collateral damage this caused, so I poured as much mana into Shitaria's shield as I could, hoping it would endure the aftershock. Yeah! Ferdinand, Eckert, and Karlstadt all struck the Turnishbefallen with a huge mana attack with no regard for their surroundings. The beast disappeared so suddenly that it was kind of underwhelming, leaving a single face stone in its place, but the impact was far from a letdown. Students cried out all around me. Shitaria's shield trembled and made sparking noises as it bore the shockwave, but it seemed to endure thanks to my constant supply of mana. Those who had been closest to the Turnishbefallen weren't able to stand their ground with just their shields to protect them, so many were flung back, especially the nearby Immerdig students. Of course, students were the only ones affected by the blast. The Dunkelfelder Knights, who were fighting another Turnishbefallen elsewhere while trying to minimize collateral damage, were hit as well. Several knights who hadn't seen the shockwave coming were thrown into the air. "What idiot launched a full-power attack with this many people around?" came a shout from Heishitz, who had been flung back just as he was about to land a blow himself. "Me," Ferdinand replied coolly. "Use your brain and finish this quickly." Acting slowly is exactly what the enemy wants. He then returned to the safety of my shield, disappeared his high beast, and walked straight toward me. The students between us quickly stood up and made a path for him. "Rosemine, I was hit by the Turnishbefallen. Heal me, Flute Train, first." He turned away from me, revealing his completely shredded new cape, and a series of reddish-black welts that ran down his back. The red wasn't just blood, there was sludge like that which I had seen at the gathering spot wriggling on his wounds, too. "This happened to you earlier," I asked, "and you said you were fine. This doesn't look the slightest bit fine." Slaying the beast took priority. If you have time to complain, use it to heal. As instructed, I first purified the wounds with Flute Train's blessing, refilled the mana-drained parts, then used Tailschmir's blessing to close them. Meanwhile, Ferdinand chugged a rejuvenation potion. Eckert did the same. Will we be retreating now?" I asked. "It depends on what happens above," Ferdinand replied. "Our enemy deliberately waited for royalty and students without adequate combat experience to gather in this arena. After causing some explosions and releasing Turnishbefallens, I doubt they were going to be content with just causing some panic. We're better off remaining here within Shitaria's shield where we are safe and can observe the situation, then separating and risking attack." He then paused for a moment and said, "How is your mana?" "Still fine," I replied. As we spoke, I could see the knights of other duchies descending to protect their students, maybe because Ferdinand had just carelessly blown them all aside with this attack, or because Dunkelfelder had started rethinking its approach and was now prioritizing speed over minimizing collateral damage. The fact that the knights are mobilizing suggests the viewing arena have at least somewhat secured, Ferdinand muttered as he watched the descending high beasts. I noticed that some among them were moving strangely, that they were plunging straight toward the stage. "Ferdinand, those high beasts," I said, but before I could even comment on them, he had assumed a defensive stance. "O false king, he with no Grucheshite, feel the wrath of our fallen allies." The men riding the high beasts at the front of the charge cried out as they dropped more Turnishbefallen from boxes they were carrying under their arms. Apparently, they were nobles who had survived the purge, despite their duchy having lost the civil war. Sovereign knights wielding black weapons cut down some of the falling Turnishbefallens, but this distraction allowed the high beasts to get even closer to the king. "They're suicidal terrorists!" They rushed toward the king with no regard for their own safety, aiming only to attack their target. Before them was none other than Eglantine readying a shield. "Lady Eglantine," I cried, and instinctively moved to fly over to her, but Ferdinand caught me in an instant. "Fool," he snapped, "our defenses are weak enough already. You cannot leave and cost us our most important shield." "But you may entrust this to the sovereign knights. This job is to protect royalty, which yours is to be protected. You have any strength to spare, use it to protect Ehrenfest in turn." I watched as the sovereign knight commander, Roblet, started cutting down the terrorists. They dropped from their high beasts, their bodies beginning to swell in unsettling ways. "Avert your gaze, Rosemine, you too, Charlotte," Ferdinand said as he covered our eyes with his sleeve. An instant later there was a series of quiet bursting sounds. The reactions of those around us, holding back their urge to vomit, was enough for me to guess what had happened. "Uncle," Charlotte said uneasily, still unable to see. "Rosemine was disturbed to the point of mental instability from Haas alone," Ferdinand said plainly. "You are both better off not seeing, else you lose sleep for who knows how long." "Right." My vision was blocked, but I could tell the situation was changing from the sounds alone. Dunkelfelder slew each Turnishbefallen one after another while the Sovereign Knight's order successfully protected the royals to the bitter end. As it turned out, there hadn't actually been that many terrorists in the end, and those who had revealed themselves were now no more. In their dying breaths, they had unleashed their hatred of the victorious royals and of all the winning duchies satisfied with their false king. Once all the traitors for Fallens were slain and the remaining terrorists were dealt with, the main focus became carrying the wounded back to their dormitories. Where their duchies would heal them, some appealed for the award ceremony to continue with those who remained, unwilling to allow the terrorists even the slightest victory. Rosemine returned to the dormitory with the wounded, Ferdinand said. What? You have protected our duchy students with Zaria's shield and healed many. You are low on mana, and if you remain here, it would only cause more problems. I don't feel low on mana, though. Although I thought it was strange, I agreed Ferdinand would be returning with me, since he was likely in danger without his protective cape and magic tools. Rosemine is going to have Riarda with her, so only Judith needs to join her, Ferdinand said. Cornelius and Nora remain here. I believe you have rewards to collect. Cornelius, this is your final award ceremony. Make your parents proud, Ferdinand said, his voice surprisingly soft and considerate. Elvira came just to see this. Eckert was next to address Cornelius, who was unable to argue. Mother really has been looking forward to this, he said with a reassuring smile. That is, she's been looking forward to you and Lenora being decorated together. Cornelius slumped over, at which point Eckert gave him a firm pat on the back and said that he'd look after both Ferdinand and me. In other words, Cornelius really didn't have a choice in the matter. Incidentally, I came first in class for the second time. And for the second time, I was unable to participate in the award ceremony. Well, this time it really was out of your control. Anyway, I'll get to work on this, and I'll see everybody next time.